Hey everybody, Jason Sherman here. In today's episode of Zero to CEO, I have with me best-selling author and change management thought leader, Brendon Baker. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
And today we're going to talk about what every change leader needs to know about. And we're going to talk a little bit about how we can get results from this, which is a very actionable kind of topic that I like. So tell me a little bit about what a change leader does in the first place for someone who doesn't know who's listening.
Yeah, so a change leader is someone that drives change. It really is as simple as that. That there's this complexity around the whole thing. It's like, well, what is change? Is it people? Is it this? But I take the purest possible look at it. A change is someone who is driving change, and change in the broader sense, as in we need to shift from A to B. That's it.
Oh, that's pretty straightforward. And change leaders are, I guess, tasked to deliver some sort of results through change. So take me through maybe an example or two of how that actually happens, how a change leader creates results for like a client or a company.
Yeah. So I mean, a change leader can be inside a company or creating results for a client or whatnot. But ultimately, the way I think about the way that I think a change leader needs to drive things is through three priorities.
Okay.
They need to be clear up front. They then need to drive momentum and ultimately drive influence. The way that I tend to think about change is through these three ripples. And the reason I say ripples is because they're very human. Let me ask you a question, Jason. When was the last time you went to a restaurant?
Not that recently, although this weekend I did go to one and we sat outdoors, but it's been years. So besides this weekend, it's been years.
And so what was your experience like at the restaurant?
You really want to hear it. All right. Well, first there were flies buzzing around the table. I had to keep swatting them away. That was getting annoying. The noise from the traffic of the cars driving by and the fumes of the smoke coming by was kind of annoying. The service was slow. We had to keep waiting for the waiter to come back to the table. People were like overhearing our conversations. I wasn't really into that. And so on and so forth. I'm not a really big fan of restaurants because I feel like the privacy kind of goes away. And also there are these unknown factors that get in the way of your enjoyment. Whether it's, like I said, the flies, the traffic, the waiting, and all that kind of stuff. So it wasn't the best experience. The food was okay.
Yep. So how did you feel afterwards? For that 20 minutes, 30 minutes after the restaurant?
We walked. We took a walk, and it was just more like... the feeling of all those things kind of caught up to me and made me realize, like, why do I put myself through this?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And it's a sense of, almost like frustration or, it sounds like there's almost regret there, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, you didn't mention the servers there, but I mean, I've certainly had restaurant experiences where I've had sarcastic or really nonchalant type servers as well. And that has its own effect. And I mean, it's a really simple illustration, but essentially that restaurant experience, the ambiance, the serving, you sort of slow, the food, the environment, all of those elements, it rippled through to your experience. And you held that feeling and that ripple through for, 30, 40 minutes afterwards. I mean, I had an example where I went to a supermarket, and it was early in the morning because I like to get my shopping done nice and early. And they only had the express lane open, and I had a trolley of 200 things, right? And it's like, whoa, and I'm trying to get it through, and so I mean, the checkout person is just glaring at me the entire time, and I'm like, well, I had no other option here, and I mean, it wasn't her fault, but I'm walking away frustrated. She's frustrated, and the whole thing was just this really negative ripple. But if you think about it, it's like, it's not her fault. It was the store management's choice not to open up those additional lanes.
Absolutely.
All right. And in your experience, it's probably store management's choice to not put fly tractors out, and not staff up enough to make it faster and all of these elements. Right.
Yep.
And so there are these inherent decisions that ripple through. And so what's really interesting is that the same thing happens in change. It's the same pattern because this ripple effect is very human. And so I've seen, in fact, I consulted on, it was going basically close to $1 billion style, massive government program of work, massive IT program. And it was a complete and utter failure.
Oh man.
And it failed because of these ripples. And I'll detail them a little bit now. So the first ripple area, and this is really your first priority as a change leader, is get clear on what are you doing. In fact, don't just start with the what. Get clear on why. Start with the why. Why are we doing this? Answer, how are we going to actually prove success here? What's the metric shift we're looking for? Then figure out what you've got to do. Spend some time there. And my advice in that ripple is spend more time than you think you need to.
Right. Sounds like it's
And
like the entrepreneurship, identifying the problem that you're
yes,
solving, right? So
that's
that's like
exactly it.
the number one thing you do in entrepreneurship
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. There's I mean, I'm an entrepreneur in my own form as well, right? But I also talk to a few, and I've got a few advisory clients that are entrepreneurs as well. And it's amazing how much is synchronized between change leadership and entrepreneurship, because
It sounds
I mean,
similar.
it's very, very similar. So anyway, get clear. That's your first ripple.
Right.
Your second ripple area is build momentum. And so that's when you actually get in, deliver, make sure it's efficient, make sure you're actually achieving your outcomes, those kind of things. But you're also managing the morale. Because if you've got a team, driving change is really bloody difficult.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And so it has this negative morale draw. And so it has this, like they're dealing with resistance all the time. And so it wears them down. And so your job as a leader is to maintain that morale as well and keep that momentum flowing upwards. And you cannot do that if you're not clear up front.
It's like a team quarterback on a football team. You gotta
That's exactly, yes.
call the shots, make sure everyone's pumped, make sure everyone's ready for the play, and make sure everyone stays on track for the touchdown. Interesting.
Yeah, you're absolutely spot on. And then the final ripple there is you create influence, drive influence. And you can't do that unless you have a team that's enthusiastic and are delivering well. And you can't do that unless you're clear, right? So it's this ripple forward effect.
Yeah.
And the thing to keep in mind when you're driving influence is essentially two levers. What's in it for them, which we all know. We all know it's like, okay, think with empathy, what's in it for them, that kind of thing. But there's a second half to that no one tends to talk about is, and what pain are you asking them to endure to get that reward, right? It's reward and pain. So it's like, what's in it for them? What's the reward? And what pain are you expecting them to endure? And the harder you make it to get that reward, the more resistance you're going to get, right?
That's tough.
Yes.
And you mentioned momentum, and I mean, things have changed dramatically during the pandemic, especially when it comes to momentum and I guess enthusiasm and wanting to succeed in a company or be a part of a startup or whatnot. So you have this scientifically backed momentum strategy that you mentioned, I believe, in your book. And how does that work? Like, what's the momentum path? How do you enable leaders to figure out what the momentum level is of their employees in the first place? And then how do you get it to the place where you want it to be? Because that's hard.
It is hard. Yeah. You're absolutely spot on. It is hard. So momentum is a really nice way to think about it. And this is the way that I tend to think about it is if you imagine an XY axis, and on the Y axis, you've got hope. And on the X axis, you've got energy. So vertical hope, horizontal energy.
Got it.
And what momentum is, it's the intersection between hope and energy. And that's what's driving the morale. That's what's driving the momentum. That's what's driving people forward and people wanting to work. And so if you have extremely low hope and extremely low energy, like the very, very bottom 0, 0 of each, what you've got are people in the depths of despair. And these are people that don't want to be there but feel stuck.
Right.
They don't know how to exit. And so it's like these are people that are taking all of their sick leave. These are people that are not turning up. They're leaving before that, basically on the dot, arriving as late as they possibly can, completely disengaged, extremely low productivity. And on the complete opposite end, extremely high energy, extremely high hope, you get people that are beyond motivated. You get people that are fanatic, right? And these are the people that line up for a day to get the newest Apple iPhone, right? Or go to the midnight launch of Halo or whatever it is, right? It's that level of obsession.
Yeah.
And you go, okay, well, there's things in between that, but ultimately it's a gauge of hope and energy. And so, I mean, if there's stages in between it, and I'm not sure if we'll have time to delve into all of them, but
Yeah.
There's a really simple illustration, really simple rule to keep in mind here is that the line that runs between hope and energy on this hypothetical XY axis
Right.
is not a 45-degree line.
Huh.
Hope and energy don't increase at the same rate.
Okay. So it's like
What it,
a kind of like a balancing act.
well, what it does is it leans towards hope first.
Right.
And so it leans heavily hope and then comes across to energy.
Right.
And so that's why you can't motivate people like using the traditional motivation style techniques of empowerment and blah blah blah. You can't use that kind of motivational techniques with people that are in the depths of despair, with people that
Mm.
want to leave because they don't
Yeah.
care.
Right. It's just a paycheck for them. They're not getting any kind of incentives for being there. Maybe it's just like a dead end retail job and they're not learning
Yeah.
anything new. So, working at a startup is exciting. You can use your creativity. You have hopes for potentially growing in the company and or exiting one day with your stock options. So you're energetic to kind of put all your time and ideas into it because the hope and energy is kind of aligned with what you want and what your goals are. So that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
So I'm a project manager, right? I manage a lot of whether people in marketing, whether developers, whether business or branding, content
Mm-hmm.
generation, you name it. How can I make sure that the startup that I'm working or anyone listening or watching, how can anybody really guarantee success by using your methodologies? Like what are the top three things? I mean, I know you mentioned some earlier, but what can I really implement today that would work to
It's going to be
achieve that hope energy that you're talking about?
yeah. I really it's spend more time on clarity than you expect to. So dial in the why more than you expect to. Spend more time than you expect to on figuring out what are the shifts you're wanting to make,
So
and do
wait,
that.
let's talk about that for a second.
Mhm.
So because
Yeah.
you say that a lot, you say, what's the why? So, I mean,
Mhm.
say I have a vision and I'm solving a problem in the world, my startup,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
How do I really push that onto the team, the why more? Is it more like creating a presentation for them? Is it like putting up a vision board? Is it like whiteboard with post-it notes? Like how do I really emphasize it to them?
Yeah. So it's really mainly about repetition. But before you even get to repetition, and so all of your answers are, there's no wrong answer, there's no right
Okay.
answer in that space. Because I mean, the answer to that is it depends because who knows what environment and team and everything else you've got there. But um, if you can, you want to be doing co-creation, not necessarily on the why, but on the what does why look like?
Mm,
That next question down, which is what does this actually look like in terms of the metric shifts we're looking to? Like how do we realize that why in reality? You can spend some time in co-creation there with the key people, with the crucial people, with the influencers in your organization.
right.
Then you figure out, well, what exactly do we need to do? And if you're not the one delivering, if you're the one leading or managing, you get them to figure out what needs to be done. You don't tell them, right? And
Yeah.
so it's flowing it through. And so what you're not doing is you're not starting with the what. You're not starting with the shiny thing. You're starting with the why. You're co-creating the metrics, and then you're going, okay, well, what do we actually need to get? What do we actually need to do to make those metric shifts? And then your job is then to drive the momentum and enable the delivery of
Got
those
it.
aspects.
That makes sense. That's great. I hope people out there that are listening or watching are going to be using these methods because they sound great. And your book, you have a book for sale. Do you have a website that people can check out what you do or learn more about your organization or buy your books or whatnot?
Yeah, absolutely. So the book is A Valuable Change: What You Need to Know to Ensure Your Change Pays Off. But just type in valuable change. It's available in uh, basically any format you'd like to consume it.
Okay.
So audiobook and ebook and hardcover and paperback, whatever takes your fancy, it's there. Amazon and everywhere else. I'm at valuablechange.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm sure the links will be around this
Yep.
podcast somewhere.
I'll add them in the
So
description for you.
perfect. And so jump on LinkedIn, connect with me, send me a message. And I also have a weekly newsletter, which I'm rather proud of, which is the Change Leader Weekly.
Oh,
And I'm proud of it because it has grown exponentially in terms of viewership, readership over the last 12 months since I've launched it. and my unsubscribe rates are extremely low.
Sweet.
So there must be something in it,
Well,
right?
that's a testament for how valuable it is, worth of information. So subscribe to his newsletter, everybody.
That's exactly it.
Awesome. Thank you, Brendon. This was awesome. Hopefully you guys all subscribe and check out his book and his website. And as always, we will see you guys in the next episode.